The Event Industry News podcast is sponsored by Present Communications. Present provides broadcast quality live, hybrid and virtual event production trusted by organisations where reliability really matters. From corporate town halls and conferences to high-profile live streams, they design and deliver fully resilient systems that work first time. Hello everybody and welcome along to the Event Industry News podcast with me, James Dickson, wishing you all a very good morning, afternoon or evening whenever or wherever you tune into today's podcast from. My guest today has had, on the face of it anyway, a unique journey into the events industry to the point that they are today. We're going to be finding out a little bit more about them, the organisation that they work for, the work that they do, maybe some of the clients that they work for on a global level. I'm delighted to say that joining the Event Industry News podcast for the first time is the business director and head of live at Imagination, Ross Wheeler. Ross, a very warm welcome to the podcast.
Hi, James. Morning, afternoon.
Yeah, absolutely. You never know, really. That's why I fell into the habit of saying it, because you can't take for granted that anybody's going to listen to it at what we would call a normal time of day. You know, people, listen to these things all over the world. Indeed, when they're flying all over the world now, such as the way of technology.
Absolutely. It's nice to be with you.
Yeah, thanks very much. And you join us today from Imagination's base in London, but having just, I think you said off air just before we started, flown in from Canada recently for
this
a job
weekend,
over there.
Just back in from Canada, having a look at some stuff over there. So yeah, just good to be back in London, and actually, sun's shining, so it makes a change.
It's glorious over here at the moment. And I said in my introduction, Ross, that you had, on the face of it anyway, a sort of a unique start to your career, and the journey into events wasn't from perhaps what we would call a traditional route. Tell us a little bit about yourself, first of all, and that journey that I've alluded to, and how you find yourself here today.
Well, yeah, I guess if we wind the clock right back, I actually started bizarrely training as a ballet dancer with the Royal Ballet. So back in my early years, I think my sister was doing some ballet classes. I was sitting outside watching, true Billy Elliot story, and ended up just getting involved in sort of like the Saturday schools, and then actually through into White Lodge at the Royal Ballet School, where, ballet was very much my life for 7 or 8 years. And at which point I had sort of several problems about, back and knee and growth problems that anyone who's in that world will know about, which sort of took me out of it, took me into a bit more of the other side of performing, which I didn't particularly like. And that took me into sort of backstage, stage management, lighting, theatre, did some A-levels, ultimately ended up going to LAMDA, London Academy of Music and Dramatic Arts, did all the backstage courses there. Thought I was going to very much go into sort of like West End, stage management, theatrics and all that kind of thing. But got sort of caught up in a bit of a whirlwind that is Imagination, which is sort of, incredible design communication agency, does stuff all over the world. Turned up here 28 years ago, didn't think I was going to sort of like it that much. They said, look, come on board, we do loads of production. And I joined as a junior production manager with a lot of knowledge about theatricality. Having been on stage myself at the Opera House as a junior member for quite a few hundred performances, but also now understanding the technical. And I kind of did it going into a world going, actually, I'm not sure, how I'm going to engage with corporate life. But 28 years later, sort of 7 or 8 years as a production manager, then the sort of team talking to me saying, look, the clients quite like talking to you because you know a lot of how it's delivered. You're also very straightforward about, how you say stuff. And you have a good understanding of, the creativity that comes with it. So, somehow from ballet dancing all the way through to now head of live, business director here, it's been an interesting journey. But I think they have a real correlation. And anyone who knows Imagination, or if you've spent any time with us, knows that this place around the world, our offices, they're full of very diverse and different types of people, but a handful of them definitely have like this theatrical background, because I think there's something to be said, in the world of experiences, which is what we're in, bringing things to life, trying to connect with people emotionally, trying to change people's feelings or thoughts around something, not just through classic advertising or content, but actually by going, come and feel something. You require some theatricality to do that. And I think that it plays such an important part in how you get people to move their perceptions, to understand a brand or a story, better. So yeah, I feel that's been it's a real asset in the way
Without a doubt.
we talk about business.
Without a doubt, and I've said it many times on the podcast before when we've talked to people who have an artistic background in some way, shape, or form, being that music or drama or dance, anything that's kind of performance art related. Whilst on the face of it, as I said, it might seem like a unique starting point that you had, but when you start to think about it in more detail, it becomes very, very obvious very, very quickly how important a part that background could play in working in a creative production industry. Because I remember doing bits of drama at school, and I was always into sort of live music, and I played guitar from a young age, and did some productions at school. And
I noticed your guitar hovering in the background there.
Hovering, and it one thing I remember being told by a drama teacher in a production: everything has to be amplified, gestures have to be amplified, things have to be amplified in order to communicate with an audience. And when you bring that into the live events space and the brands and the organizations that somebody like Imagination will be working with on a daily and a weekly and a monthly basis, delivering the messages that they want to deliver and to get those messages across to their attendees, to their audiences, everything has to be done at that scale. So there's a huge correlation.
Yeah, completely. I think attention isn't the same as impact, and I think you have to we could all effectively buy reach in certain ways but you have to make real connections emotional. So if you're going to actually connect with an audience, you have to do something that they're going to feel, that they're going to want to watch, they're going to be compelled to share, they're going to talk about outside of after they've seen it for many weeks to come potentially. So always trying to find that. That's where Imagination, we were I think it's inspirational to call us Imagination when our founder Gary Withers founded us, and I always say to my team, we have to live up to our name. Our job is to constantly imagine new ways of connecting with audiences and telling those stories. So,
how difficult is that in the modern climate, both sort of economically, logistically, because having those sort of creative ideas is one thing, being able to bring them to life both from a practical point of view, from a logistical point of view, and from a budgetary point of view must be difficult. So is it a constant balancing act for you to sort of juggle those considerations to deliver what clients need?
I think it's always been that. I mean, I think that anybody in this industry, from advertising all the way through to the simplest piece of content into the biggest event or experience, everyone will always tell you it's a balancing act between money, time, ideation, and also the sort of the ambition of your client. I think one of the things that is so critical nowadays, and I would just implore anybody who's sort of on the client side, I fully appreciate there are such challenges to the way budgeting and business runs nowadays, particularly post-COVID, all of those kind of things. But time is really the enemy of creativity. And you can do an awful lot for actually quite small budgets if you have time to plan, to find the suppliers that are willing to do it for a little bit less, to book the venues, to engage sponsors, to get relationships going in a way that doesn't always equal a financial transaction. It's actually there's a benefit on both sides. You can do all of those things. What you can't do is you can't do that when you only have, 3 months to sort of put it all together. And unfortunately, more and more at the moment, we just feel that, clients do come quite late in the day and say, we want to do all of this and that's fine. We do find a way, but it often ends up costing a lot of money to do that. Or if you could just make it a little bit earlier, time is the real friend of creativity. So that's how you get better ideas. It's how you connect with, it's how you test things as well. It's so important to be able to actually test how people are going to psychologically respond to some things. Mm-hmm. And we're doing a lot of work at the moment with behavioral psychologists in how actually that the work or the project translates into a human being, how somebody perceives it. And actually doing all of that is amazing, but you need time to do it. And then you need to be able to go back to the drawing board and iterate a few times, as well as costing it and planning it. So yeah, I think we're doing it. We've got clients who are super exciting and have incredible ideas and want to do stuff, and we absolutely are doing that. But I would encourage anybody who's sort of in the industry on both sides that any time that we can buy into the process, you get a better result.
Yeah, it's interesting. Couple of things that you mentioned there about time. In terms of preparation, in terms of seeing if some of the elements that you're planning to incorporate are actually going to work in the manner and the way that that you anticipate that they're going to work. And I often find with events of any nature, be it a big corporate event, a brand activation event, there is often an element of what we would call rehearsal built into it, in terms of, a technical run through or 2 days of technical, and so on and so forth. But in the way that you would imagine a live music artist rehearsing for weeks and months in advance of going out on tour, so often I see it with sort of particularly corporate events, you might have one day of rehearsal before the conference opens. And so when you mention the subject of time, so I very rarely see anybody really sort of doing things well in advance of an event to see if it will work.
Yeah, it's true, and I think you get different, you have very much different clients, and everybody, even actors, approach things differently. Some actors, you can watch them rehearse and you are like, wow, how do you do that in an empty auditorium? And then some just absolutely, it feels dead, and then you watch them come to life in front of 500 people. You're like, how did that come from? And you come off the buzz of the audience, the people that are there. And that happens with CEOs or various speakers that come on stage for us as well. Some absolutely relish the moment. Some absolutely cannot stand rehearsing on an empty stage to a few crew in the audience. And whereas others do spend hours and hours and hours, we work with them and we coach them. I would always encourage, script writing is such an important thing, but knowing your content, of course, which you always imagine most of the executive board do, but knowing it to the point where you can eloquently talk about it slightly off script is such an important thing. But as you said, James, building in, rehearse. If you've got one moment when you're showing the world something new or a new story, or you want them to compellingly engage with it, rehearsal is critical, because you just come out better. The message is clearer, the images are stronger, and your tone is more compelling. So I think that's always good advice, and building that into rehearsal schedules, making sure that you're not, sometimes you're fighting, if you're buying a venue that's expensive and you've got 4 days to build it, do you really want to have another 2 days for rehearsal before you go live with it? It's a big cost implication, but actually sometimes that cost implication is very much worth it.
And I guess that the experience that you've got in 50 years of running a business will allow you in a certain way to communicate with the clients from day one, from the moment that they contact you and say, we're thinking of doing this, for you to be able to say, well, this is I guess the commitment that we need from you. So often there's an expectation from clients that they book an agency to deliver their event, and it's now your responsibility to do it. But it has to be a two-way transaction, doesn't it? There has to be a certain expectation from the client that they're going to also play their part and deliver, I guess, some of the indicators and the measurables that you can put on them.
It absolutely could and should be like that. It isn't always, of course, like any walk of life, that isn't the case. But I can tell you from having done this now for, I guess, 28 years here, the best projects I've ever done have come from the relationship where you have a really mutual respect for each other, whether that's, team and team, individual and individual at senior level. When you have that connection, it absolutely is where the magic happens, because it means everybody on the agency wants to work harder. Mm-hmm. Everybody on the client side is fully appreciating what's happening at agency level, and those two things blend in the middle. You get great creativity, you get complete team synergy, and I can safely say some of the most crazy things we've done, from loop the loops to barrel rolls to incredible projects, and those things come from working hand in hand with a client in the way you just said. It's where that full understanding is had. Now, imagination also can pick up some incredibly crazy brief from one of our clients anywhere around the world, and we can, because of our experience, also do it very fast. So we can
Sure.
cut through a lot of that, and we can go, right, let's just do this, this, and this, and this. We'll get you to this point. We can manage it, engineer it to allow you to still look incredible, even in short timeframes, which we do very, very often. But it's it's always a process.
I was looking at some of the on your website that there's some great examples of brands that you've worked with, and we're talking about, you know, brands that everybody will know, you know, but Guinness, Ford Racing, Red Bull Racing, you know, big events like this, Diageo, drinks brands. One thing that strikes me with big companies like that and big organizations, that they will have probably almost, I guess, sort of delivered every type of event known to them in their history, you know, if they look back. So there must not just be a challenge from from them to come up with a new idea, but when they come into you, and if it's a historic client, given the portfolio of events that they must have delivered, it must be continually challenging to come up with new ideas and not just to say, well, we did that before and it worked. You know, is it, a lot of people will think that working with big brands gives you a certain level of luxury. They're going to have big budgets, they're going to have loads of ideas and things like that, but does it actually make it more challenging because of how many things they've done over the years?
I always say to my team, you know, you have to work hardest with your clients who you're working with all the time, because you need to be constantly inspirational. We are there to be their imagination, to help them think about how they engage their customers differently. And yeah, I think something like Guinness is really interesting. Obviously, you know, if you go back all the way to sort of like 20 years ago, we helped Guinness and Diageo design the first storehouse in Ireland when it first opened. That was actually one of the first big experiences centres. We actually designed that,
Wow.
helped them come up with the whole concept. And we know it's been hugely successful. And every brand sort of almost copied the idea of it. And then to be still working with them, you know, 20 plus years later, helping them design their Covent Garden experience here in London is fantastic. But of course, the engagement, the way people engage with those stories, very different to how it was 20 years ago. So you have to always be innovative. Technology is important, but we don't let it rule our lives. We don't do things for technological sake. We do it because it's right psychologically, and the technology comes next. But you always have to be pushing the boundaries. You have to be innovative. And I think the most important thing is to always try and be that conduit between customer and also your client's product, and it's quite interesting how often clients don't always. They have an idea of what's going on in around the world. Of course, they're doing their own thing, but we're very much seeing on different levels with different clients, with different customers. So we can bring that experience to bear to our clients, which helps us imagine things differently. And yeah, when you have those wonderful working relationships, they're open to suggestions. It's just then a question of like, how do you bring all the multiple stakeholders in? How do you do it within a time frame? How do you achieve it within a budget? And of course, that takes, you know, expertise and relationships. You know, it's all about trust, people trusting people. You know, we are an entirely people industry, and you have to have those trusting relationships to be able to actually make good things happen.
Absolutely. And just, you've kind of got my brain, you know, thinking now about the task. When you look at Guinness again as an example, forgive me sort of dwelling on that just for a second, but if you think about it from a product point of view, this is a product that fundamentally hasn't changed in centuries, right? It's a pint of Guinness. Everyone knows it, everyone loves it, and you know the recipe is strict, and that's what it is. So they're not constantly innovating and trying to develop a new one in the way that a car manufacturer is trying to do that. So when you've got a car launch or a new vehicle launch or a big vehicle brand like Nissan, for example, you know, you've got a new product, new features, you've probably got lots of stuff and a story that you can tell about the development of that new thing. With somebody like Guinness, it's complete opposite, isn't it? You're dealing with a product that's centuries old that hasn't changed. So the task of innovating and telling a story about that, I guess, will be totally different to a brand new, newly developed product.
Yeah, of course. I mean, you're always trying to reach out to new audiences. I mean, I think you'll be surprised if you actually get a chance to go down to the London Gate Brewery. Then it's literally like the whole load of new beverages available. Wow. As well that Guinness are developing, and so I think there is a whole load of that that's going on as well.
Challenge
but you're
accepted.
Right. Yeah, I'll come and join you. The whole you still have to hold on to that core brand. But what you're always trying to do is you're trying to tell that story in a way that's relevant to a new audience, as opposed to the people who already love it. And you also have to do that in a way that you don't switch off the people that love it as well. So classic advertising dilemma. How do you keep everybody engaged? And it's interesting when I work a lot with like Land Rover, and when new Defender came out, stuff, you absolutely have to talk about, this is a groundbreaking vehicle. Absolutely, like people were shocked and horrified at some of the images initially, because they were like the stalwarts of Defender from many years, for good reason.
Yes. Yeah.
But actually what the new product offered and opened up huge volumes of sales around the world, transformed that product into a pillar product for Land Rover. You have to be able to engage with those audiences that are going to want that. They want to see that without trying to alienate and isolate the people who love it from the historical reasons as well.
Yeah, and let's stay on that word people for a second, because 28 years at Imagination and 50 years as a business, things will have grown, things will have developed. What's the task like of not just being creative and that day-to-day communication with the clients, but you will need to have that same level of relationship with the team internally as well, to keep them motivated, to keep the creative juices flowing, to continually expand, I guess, as the business is expanding.
100%. And I think team management is an area that so many companies don't put enough focus on. I think that it's so important to look after your team, to be in it as one. We're quite a flat structure here at Imagination. It's quite an old company, but we've actually, we operate at a very, very, from global CEO all the way down to the whole team, some of the most junior members. Everyone's very much engaged. Everyone's pretty accessible to each other. And I describe it when I'm talking to people who are coming to work for us. Imagination is a bit like joining a family. We're an independent company. We celebrate our independency, that we celebrate our originality from that. But you're coming into a family. We all know families are good and bad. there are amazing supportive things about families, but always not so, like when you're brother and sister or whatever. But you have to understand, you need to speak up at times. You need to be able, you can have an opinion. Sometimes you do have to just sit and toe the line or listen in, but making sure people understand they can do that, making sure they understand their dynamic, that they can grow within that, is important. I think the other thing that's also, probably a challenge for most people in business is, people are incredibly eager to sort of step up, earn more money. Of course, people need to nowadays step up in the tiers of am I now a midweight? Am I senior? Am I director? That everyone wants that progression super, super fast. And of course, if somebody is absolutely shining, then that's possible. But I think what's also really important for those individuals to understand is that's great until you find yourself standing in the middle of Dubai with some 4 prime ministers around you. The technology is going wrong, and suddenly you haven't got the experience that you need from many years of having stepped up to really understand how to deal with that. And you actually can find yourself in a very isolated spot. So making sure people have the right experience so they can always feel confident in their delivery, but not pushing them too far, where the point where actually they feel like they're drowning in something is always the sort of the fine line. So
Sure, yeah.
I remember, Gary and Patrick, who, Gary founded it, Patrick's our global CEO. We're great believers in let people try. People often, when you're imagining new things, you have to invent new ways of doing things. And actually,
Yes.
young and ingenious minds, they come up with incredible solutions nowadays in a way that you go, actually, we probably wouldn't have thought about that. So keeping that team dynamic is super important to us.
If I may ask, and I'm going to reference a recent podcast that we've put out there with Maria O'Day from the Event School London, talking about, and she came on to talk about the regulated qualification status that they've been awarded at the Event School in London, and we've spoken about your background at the start of today's podcast, and I wonder if we could get your thoughts on where the balance needs to be struck in an industry like ours and in an agency like yours, between bringing people into the business who might come from a creative and artistic background, who bring great ideas, but how important it might be going forward in the industry to have people who have a certain amount of qualification and training behind them as well, in order to step into a business like yours and provide maybe the level of expertise off the bat that would otherwise historically have taken maybe a few years to develop new talent within the events industry. Do you think that we need to maintain a balance between both elements?
I guess the easy answer is yes. Of course we do. I think if you look, the best people that come into any agency and anyone who's applying for a job nowadays, I suggest you always think about trying to be a bit T-shaped, which is like you can offer multiple things to a business. You are not just this, but you could be this and this.
Sure.
And I think that, if you look at my example, I came from a world of sort of theatrics, performing backstage, but I went and got some proper qualifications in lighting and sound, so I really understood how to do them. I could take those two things and apply them to the job when I joined here as a production manager. So I think having experience is critical. Having some qualifications around how you actually deliver things, whether it's project management process, whether it's just technical understanding, that can only be a valuable thing to the event industry. But it shouldn't rule out sometimes finding the gem of the person who walks in going, I just happen to feel like I could be incredibly good at this. So.
Yeah, and sometimes the way that I've looked at it in the past is not necessarily that a person could do every single job, but the communication aspect of it is as important as anything else. If you can communicate with the various different teams, whether that be the technical team, a lighting designer, a sound engineer, an artist, if you can communicate with them in a language that they understand, that's going to help the process. If you have an understanding of it to speed up that two-way communication process, I think that's where the real benefits are felt.
100%. Communication is everything. When you're in a people industry, you have to be able to know how to get to the answers quickly. When time is poor, particularly, you have to be able to, sometimes we sit in meetings with our clients where, it's like literally like just people are saying letters and everyone's expected to understand exactly what's being talked about. So you have to sort of be able to speak that language, but you also have to be able to speak the language of how you do events as well. And those things, if you're good at that, this is a core skill, as well as having lots and lots of other things that should be, fine.
Absolutely. It would be foolish of us to sort of have you on the podcast today and not allow people the chance to go and find you, find out a little bit more about what the organisation do, and indeed look through pages of your website referencing some of these really interesting projects that you've been involved in. Before we wrap up today, do throw out the website so that people can find you.
Imagination.com. So yeah, www.imagination.com. That's the one. Thank you. Come and have a look. We've got some incredible case studies ranging from, we do stuff all over the world. We've got 13 studios all over the world. And obviously I'm based in the UK, but travel quite extensively amongst them. We do projects from the smallest, tiniest little things to the craziest, biggest government things in the Middle East and incredible car launches around the world, stuff for Disney. I mean, we have such an eclectic mix. That's the thing that I love about this company. It's original, it's hugely diverse. The work we do is different every single day. I was just talking to one of my team I was with in Canada and just said, you never know what you're going to be doing next week. And that's something that's, it's not for everybody, but it certainly keeps your life interesting.
It keeps you on your toes in this industry. You never know what's going to be thrown at you, and with all the planning and the stuff that we've talked about, inevitably, I guess that's one of the things that people absolutely love, and that's the sort of the real buzz that people get from it, is all the planning and all the preparation. You will inevitably still get to somewhere and be thrown those curveballs and be asked to come up with solutions on site, and that's kind of great, I guess, paradox. The planning and the improvisation, that you have to be able to deliver both of those in equal parts to work effectively in the industry.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's been great speaking to you today. My guest has been Ross Wheeler from Imagination. I guess talking all things agency, journey into the industry. Ross, thanks very much for taking 30 minutes out of your day today to have a chat with us. Where are you off to next in the world? Having come in from Canada, where's the next journey?
I think heading to Greece actually in the next week and a half. So.
Not a bad time of year to head over there. Well, safe travels. Continued good luck with all the projects that you're involved in. Thanks for joining us today.
Great, thanks, James. Really lovely to chat with you.
And before we sort of fully wrap up today's episode, as usual, the messages from me about event industry news. If you've started your journey today by watching today's podcast on the Event Industry News website, thank you very much for doing so. Please do take a few moments to have a look at the rest of the website. Of course, the latest news, features, special supplements, all the good stuff that the Event Industry News team is working on. The news section is divided into individual sections related to specific areas of the industry, including, of course, the wedding events industry section that we launched at the start of this year. And one thing to mention, of course, always is the A to Z supplier directory. If you work in the events industry and you're looking for a product, service, or supplier, the chances are you will find it in the supplier directory on the Event Industry News website. Of course, you may have listened to today's podcast via your podcast platform. If you've done so, thank you very much for tuning in. Please do make sure that you are fully sort of subscribed and like the podcast on your platform so that you get the latest episodes when they drop. And do make sure that you also head over to the website once you finish listening to today's podcast to check out all of those things that I've just mentioned that are available on the website. It's been great chatting to Ross Wheeler today from Imagination, and we'll see you on the next edition of the podcast. Goodbye, everybody.